Before I get into the main topic of this video, I wanted to share a little bit of a fun fact about myself, and that is that I'm a big fan of collecting figures, be it Gundams, Kamen Riders, or any other particular character that have inspired my work over the years. And fortunately for me, being the huge Metroid fan that I am, the past couple of years have seen the release of some high quality and affordable Samus figures, and earlier this year I was lucky enough to get myself a copy of the gorgeous looking Metroid Prime 3 Varia suit Figma, and I absolutely love it. Being a huge fan of the Prime series, I was so excited to get a figure with this level of detail on its sculpting and painting. But there is one big thing missing for me to consider this figure to be absolutely perfect. And that is, where's my beam or missile accessory for it? I don't need to sound like a negative Nancy over here, but for how much I love the Max Factory line of figures, sometimes I find their lack of items in the accessories department to be a bit appalling considering the price of their figures. It's even more shocking to me when you realize that this particular Samus Figma brings an additional piece to make the arm cannon engage in its missile launcher. Even a game like Hunter states that Samus' weapon of choice are missiles, so why not add one with your figure that clearly brings a hole to add an accessory like this? But again, it's not to say that this figure came with nothing or that it's terrible or anything, since it does bring some alternate hands like the iconic thumbs up and the handy dandy Morph ball. But considering the arsenal of many items at Samus' disposal, it comes as a bit disappointing that Max Factory didn't include something from her extensive armory. I guess if we're talking about beam power-ups, there's always the old reliable power beam, also known as the normal beam in some of the classic games, which is the arm cannon's default method of attacking. While there might not be anything particularly spectacular about this weapon outside the fact that it has unlimited ammo, the power beam can be upgraded to become stronger in a similar fashion to how Samus can upgrade her power suits. With the use of the charge beam, she can fire stronger blasts of energy, and can also increase its blast radius with the aid of the diffusion beam in Metroid Other M. But however, in the original NES game as well as remake Metroid Zero Mission, you needed to upgrade this weapon with the aid of the long beam in order to shoot your projectiles across the entire screen, which made the power beam feel more like a pea shooter in those games. Metroid 2 would later introduce even more upgrades to make the power beam more reliable in the form of the spacer beam, which splits the normal projectile into 3 separate lasers, giving the beam a wider range of attack. This particular beam could later be used in combination with other projectiles in Super Metroid, and will also reappear in Metroid Fusion with a different cosmetic look under the name of the Wide Beam. On top of these upgrades, Samus can also switch and combine the effects of a number of different beam projectiles to help her adapt to all sorts of combat scenarios. The Wave Beam is distinguished by its purple color, and has the special ability to travel through walls and other surfaces in the 2D games. However, in Metroid Prime, the beam instead has the ability to stun your enemies for a brief moment with its added electrical properties, as well as powering up certain electronics found in the environments, and could also be upgraded with the use of the Wave Buster to fire a constant stream of electricity. We then also have the Ice Beam, which can be considered to be one of Samus' most iconic weapons due to it being the main tool used to defeat the Metroids because of their weakness to cold temperatures. As the name implies, the Ice Beam is capable of freezing enemies in their place, which Samus can then use as convenient platforms. Heck, it can even freeze enemies in midair because bird magic, I guess. And in Metroid Prime, you can also upgrade it with the use of the Ice Spreader, which fires a powerful homing shot with a large freezing radius. The Plasma Beam is a very powerful weapon that is capable of piercing through multiple enemies with the use of a single projectile. And for this reason, it's usually considered to be the strongest regular beam upgrade in the classic games, and is visually distinctive because of its green color. In the Metroid Prime series, the Plasma Beam is more of a heat-based weapon capable of burning its targets, as well as being used as a tool to weld certain metals together in Metroid Prime 3. The Plasma Beam also received a special power-up in the first Prime game in the form of the Flamethrower, which is well self-explanatory. At the end of Super Metroid, Samus gains the ability to use the Hyper Beam from the energy stolen by Baby Metroid, which can only be used during the final battle against Mother Brain. A similar beam was also available to Samus during the final boss fight in Metroid Prime in the form of the Phazon Beam, which could fire highly concentrated shots made from the radioactive substance. This beam will later become part of her main arsenal in Metroid Prime 3 thanks to the added functions of the PED suit and the use of its Hyper Mode. In Metroid Prime 2, Samus gains the ability of using 3 distinct beam upgrades, which were created by the Luminoth in their struggle to protect their planet against the Eng. The Dark Beam uses similar energy to the one found in Dark Aether's atmosphere, and has the ability to cling onto its targets to deal some extra damage, as well as also petrifying them when used with a fully charged shot. This beam is highly effective against creatures from Light Aether, and can also be upgraded with a Dark Burst to open a small but unstable dimensional rift for a couple of moments. The Dark Beam was made by the Luminoth in an attempt to overload the creatures from the Dark Dimension with the toxics found in their world. And while it was useful in the beginning, it wasn't quite enough to stop them. This led them to the creation of the Light Beam, which would instead be based around the energy of Light Aether, and proved to be a deadlier tool against their enemies. This beam also has the added functions of momentarily burning its targets upon contact, and can fire in a scattershot formation when used in combination with the charge beam, as well as unleashing a white-hot sphere of light with the aid of the sunburst. And we then have the elusive Annihilator Beam, which combines the energy of both light and dark beams to create special matter-antimatter projectiles that can home onto its targets, and can also be upgraded with a Sonic Boom to fire large blasts of sonic energy. During the events of Metroid Prime 3, the Space Pirates created a new tool that could aid them in the process of mining Phazon from the Leviathan seeds, in the form of the Nova Beam. This high-frequency weapon was later stolen by Samus to better navigate her way through the pirate homeworld, and can be used in combination with the X-ray visor to quickly take down certain enemies. But as I mentioned before, the other main weapon available to Samus through her arm cannon comes in the form of the missile launcher. These projectiles will most of the time have the same amount of damage output as regular charge shots from the power beam, and they also come in a variety of forms, such as the super missiles, which deals 5 times the amount of damage when compared to regular missiles. Ice missiles in Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime 3 could freeze enemies upon contact, and lastly the Seeker missiles, which allows Samus to fire 5 individual missiles that can lock onto multiple targets. However, Metroid Prime Hunters will also introduce a couple of new weapons that can be equipped onto the arm cannon, which originally belonged to the new Hunters that were introduced in that game. Cannon's Volt Driver fires quick-moving electrical blasts, and when charged, it launches a slow-moving projectile that homes onto its targets and momentarily disrupts their visor. Spyros' Magmo launches molten projectiles that can bounce off walls and can also heavily burn its enemies upon contact. Noxus' Judicator fires a single shot of super cool plasma that can ricochet against walls, and when fully charged can emit an ice wave that freezes its enemies. Weevil's Battle Hammer, which looks nothing like a traditional hammer, is a heavy mortar-like weapon with a high rate of fire that can shoot exploding projectiles. Trace's Imperialist fires an extremely powerful single laser with a limited rate of fire that basically serves as this game's sniper rifle. And lastly, Silex's Shock Coil produces a constant stream of electricity that drains the energy from its targets. However, Metroid Prime Hunters also introduced one last unique arm cannon upgrade that did not belong to any character in particular, known as the Omega Cannon. This weapon is what's presumed to be the foretold ultimate power in the Limbic Message, which is primarily used during the final fight against Goria, and has the ability to fire a slow-moving ball of radioactive energy with a timed explosion. But that's not to say that those are all of the power-ups at Samus' disposal, as she does have access to a plethora of other tools to help her on her missions. Probably Samus' most recognizable power-up, not including her armor, has to be her iconic Morph Ball. This useful power-up allows Samus to control herself into the size of a ball, which is something that the pirates can easily tell you is something rather difficult to replicate, and gives her the ability to roll into narrow passages while still being able to defend herself with the use of regular bombs and power bombs, as well as the ability to jump with the Spring Ball, traverse through certain terrain with the speed given by the Boost Ball, or even the ability to cling itself onto walls with the Spider Ball. There are also a great amount of passive abilities focused on helping Samus navigate through her environments, such as the High Jump Boots to increase her maximum jump height, or the Space Jump that allows her to pretty much do infinite somersault jumps while in the air when compared to the Space Jump Boots from Metroid Prime, which only give her an ordinary double jump. The Grapple Beam can be used to tether Samus onto specific surfaces so she can then swing across large gaps in the environment, as well as siphoning the energy from certain targets with the Grapple Voltage, or rip off certain objects with the use of the Grapple Lasso in Metroid Prime 3. And even though Samus is already very fast on her feet, she can use the Speed Booster to run at incredible speeds, as well as allowing her to store that momentum and then release it with a jump in the form of a Shine Spark. The screw attack is another one of Samus's most popular power-ups that engulfs her in an aura of energy when she performs a somersault that can destroy pretty much almost any enemy upon contact. But it's not as popular as the extremely memorable power grip from Zero Mission that allows Samus to, well, hang on to ledges. Moving on, the Visor can also be upgraded with some power-ups to help Samus adapt to the many environments that she will be visiting on her journeys. The Thermal Visor allows her to detect enemies or objects based on their heat signatures, while the X-Ray Visor helps her detect enemies that are invisible to the naked eye, such as the spooky scary Choso ghosts. In Super Metroid, this item was known as the X-Ray Scope that allows Samus to see hidden passages as well as destructible blocks. Samus can use the Dark Visor to see objects that are interdimensionally stuck between light and dark either, or in simpler terms, see certain invisible objects just like the X-Ray Visor. The Echo Visor works almost as a visual echolocation device that allows her to see sound waves. The Command Visor lets Samus remotely control her trusty gunship to aid her in her adventures, and the extremely useful Scan Visor allows her to learn more about her surroundings and interact with certain objects. Finally, the recently released Samus Returns introduced some new power-ups in the form of the Aeon abilities that utilize the unique energy found on planet SR-388. The Scan Pulse works as a sonar which allows Samus to chart a map of the planet. The Lightning Armor protects her from physical damage and powers up her melee counter. The Beam Burst greatly increases the rate of fire of her primary beam. And the Phase Drift slows down time around Samus, allowing her to overcome certain obstacles or incoming enemy attacks. Without counting the base functions of her Power Beam and missiles, some of the strongest weapons in Samus's arsenal come in the form of the Plasma Beam for dealing extra damage to the enemies that it pierces, the Power Bomb for working as a screen nuke in the 2D games, and the Screw Attack for single-handedly destroying almost any enemy upon contact. As for her more passive abilities, I always found the Speed Booster to be very useful to quickly traverse through the terrain, the Space Jump for basically making platforming a thing of the past, and the Scan Visor for helping the player learn more about the environments and gain useful tips when fighting against the bosses. From a gameplay standpoint, some of my favorite power-ups come in the form of the Spacer Beam for making it easier to hit my enemies, the Speed Booster for how fun it is to traverse through the world at high speeds and using the Shine Spark, the Scan Visor since it lets me learn more about the worlds of the Prime series, and the Grapple Beam, well, because it makes Samus feel like Spider-Man. One thing that I love about these power-ups is that not only do they give you a great sense of progression from seeing how Samus slowly becomes stronger with each upgrade, especially when it's your reward for defeating a difficult enemy, but they also give you new ways to interact with the world around you that change your approach to exploration, but also makes you feel as being one with the environment. And even though almost all of the games at some point recycle the same abilities from the past, each installment not only includes new tools to add into Samus's already extensive arsenal, but they also come up with new ways to incorporate the older power-ups into the gameplay by giving them new and interesting ways that they can help you navigate through your surroundings. Be it opening a door or triggering a switch with a specific weapon, detecting new parts of the world with the use of a visor, or managing your way through the planet's landscape with a Morph Ball. All of these items allow the player to immerse themselves even more into the role of Samus as they gain a sense of satisfaction from uncovering new secrets hidden within the worlds around them. And this is one of the biggest key aspects that made the Metroid franchise so iconic and established it as being one of the greatest series from the gaming medium. So Max Factory, next time you decide to make a postable Samus figure, please consider adding any of the power-ups I just mentioned that aren't just the Morph Ball. And while I'm at it, would it be too much to ask for an Endoroid Samus or an Elma Figma? Please?